Hello, hello, welcome, welcome, welcome. I hear there's an accident. We're shy some people that have registered, but we are going to kick off because y'all are here. Yay! So, yay. So hello, live streamers. If you can hear me, just say hello. I know some of you have been saying where you are streaming in from, so if you haven't introduced yourself to the other live streamers, y'all seem to have your own conference in a conference, so go ahead and introduce yourselves to one another because you'll be chatting back and forth throughout tonight. So glad you are here. Thank you. My name is Jeffrey Van Dyke. We are at the Hall Center in Santa Monica. And I'm excited for this evening because there's some really new, fresh stuff bubbling. And so I want to dive into that tonight. Could you guys come up here? We have some people, like I said, probably stuck on a highway, but I want to be with you guys. So let me just share a little bit about what these evenings are, how we go about having these nights, what we do here, why we do it, all that good stuff, and then we'll dive in from there. A few years ago, I was just told, hey, you're supposed to be doing these evenings, these monthly gatherings. They're a local hub for a global happening. So the live streamers, y'all were included from the get-go. And it's really an opportunity. I have a body of work that the kind of beginning body of my work is based around marketing and looking at how your core wounds shape who you understand best in the world, and from that place, who you're meant to serve. So at a business level, it looks at what should be your ideal niche, what's your ideal offer, how do you serve those people, how do you message to those people so they go, oh my God, you're who I've been waiting for, right? That's sort of the bulk of my day job work in my business. But these evenings are a little different. These evenings are a place for us to take ideas and open them up and see what's inside. I know Bob's here, and Bob's like, yeah, I realize business is my spiritual path, and he calls this business church. So that's kind of what this is. And each month there's a new idea we're opening up and seeing what's inside of it. I often don't know much about the idea before I get here. So we're really doing this together. And we're doing this together with live streamers. But I do usually get a sense of what the topic is. In fact, I know next month's topic, which is the first to know next month's topic already, which is going to be about the power of your story and where to find the correct stories to connect with your tribe. So that's going to be a really, really fun night. And that is we're in August, right? So that'll be in September. And then for those of you that don't have these dates down yet, in just a little bit, within probably about 2 weeks or so, 2, maybe 3 weeks, we'll be sharing the big details about the fall event in November. So there is an event I'm doing. It's at the Hotel MDR in Marina Del Rey. It's 15 minutes from LAX. It's a 3-day deep dive called Called to Lead. And I'll talk a little bit more about that later tonight, but that is November 16, 17, 18. Once again, November 16, 17, 18. So I know some of you live streamers have been waiting for a time to I've heard from a lot of you over the last couple of years, man, I would love to come to one of the Thursday nights, but I can't justify the flight from Chicago for a 2-hour event. So here's a 3-day event, and it's really an opportunity to take what we do here in bits and pieces and dive deep. So I'll talk a little bit more about that soon, but just so you know that is coming down the pike. Also in a few weeks, there is going to be a new course. So for those of you who said yeah, where do you do work with the wounds that seem to get in the way of my big expansion and my success and really being able to have the kind of reach I feel called to have? So that course is coming your way very, very soon. And it's called The Essential Shift. So we'll be getting details for that very soon as well. Okay, good. So let's just dive in here. Let's just drop in for a moment, and then we'll move from there. So I just know that there is a force that has assembled us. There's a force that called these monthly gatherings into being. There's a force that has assembled us to co-create them together. There is a force that inspires us and feeds us and leads us and guides us. And so this evening, we just drop into being available to what wants to happen. What wants to happen. And of course, we each come here with our ideas about why we're here, me included. and then we show up to what wants to happen and allow it to emerge through us and for us. And so I just lay claim to that knowing and put myself in service to that thing, that it inspires us, that it lifts us up, and that it shows us our way. And so it is. About 3 weeks ago, maybe a month ago, shortly after my birthday, so yeah, about 3 weeks ago, this idea of life force started really coming into my consciousness. And this conversation, I don't anticipate particularly being like, oh my God, I've never heard of any of this before. That's not what this is about. What I want to open up is our relationship to what calls us. And the message I heard was that all inspired ideas have their own life force. And that life force has intelligence to it. And we have a few opportunities. There's sort of like 3 phases we seem to be in relationship to life force. And we'll unpack these as we go through the night. But the first phase is being unaware of it. I'm just doing my life, and I don't know what the heck you're talking about with life force, right? Cause, effect, I push the thing, it falls over. What? So that's phase 1. Most people in my tribe are not in phase 1. Then there's phase 2. And this has a big stretch to it, or can have a big stretch to it. And that is where we get an idea. Oh, I'm supposed to do this thing, right? I have a few people here who are part of a 3-day intensive this weekend to develop this signature program that really is from this life force, from their soul. And a couple of them are up here, and the signature systems we're planning to work are frankly a little scary. It's like, whoa, that thing? Like, these are nice, pleasant offers. Can't I do those? That thing? Ooh, I'm not so sure about that one. That has a live wire. Well, yeah, it does. It has a life force inside of it, right? If you were here to recreate everything that's already been done, you could do the other ones. But people in my tribe are not called to do that. We're here to craft what's next, what's emerging, right? And so ideas come in. And the ones that have life force are the ones that seem to stay with us. And we'll talk about how do you determine if it has life force or not. But what most people tend to do, for a good while it seems, is have an on and off again romance with life force, right? Like, we catch it, we get like seduced by life force, it's so sexy. And then somewhere along the way, as we try to execute what we're meant to do, we kind of forget about it. And we're just like nose to the grindstone, doing our work. And that grinds us down. And eventually, we go, oh, this sucks. Like, this doesn't feel right. This doesn't have life force. And eventually, we crash and burn enough that we eventually surrender and open up. And then we reconnect at some point, right? When we go, okay, uncle, I don't know what to do. And then we're open again and life force, right? Ooh, I got it. This is it now. And we do the same thing and we go and we do, and then we put our blinders on and start working and nose to the grindstone, and then nothing seems to be working and doors don't seem to be opening and we don't know what's going on. So that's phase 2. Lots of drama, very exciting. Eventually it wears you the heck down. And then there is phase 3, which is full-time partnership. And a lot of what we're going to be talking tonight is what's inside of phase 3. And what are some of the things you need to address in phase 2 to move into phase 3? Phase 3 in full-time partnership is where we go, I'm just showing up, right? I'm showing up. Whatever comes in my path that has life force, I'm saying yes to it, right? And if it has life force, I'm moving towards it. And if it doesn't have life force, not mine to do. Might be a very cool thing, but not mine to do. Or maybe not mine to do now. Doesn't matter. In phase 3, there's very little need to know about where it's all going. There's very little need to know about the overall strategy, because the strategy is bigger than you. So you could never see it all anyway. All you ever need to know is, what's my part? What's the piece I'm meant to say yes to? And where is that leading me? So I want to tell you a few stories to illustrate a couple of these pieces. And then I want to unpack 2 and unpack 3 and see where that leads us. All right. By the way, when I do this head thing, my friends call it my spiritual Tourette's. It's when I get like messages and like, hey, do that. Okay. The thing that I'm going to be doing 2 things tonight. I'm going to be speaking to your mind and your intellect. There's maybe some emotional stuff that's here. And then there is something else in the mix. And as we talk about the movement from 2 to 3, we're going to talk about what this something else is. But I'll just put a little precursor in here to say it's where reverence lives. It's where we have a sense of the sacred. And so I just want you to presence that tonight as we keep going. And so we're going to kind of listen in multiple levels as we go. So phase 2. No, they're telling me not to start there. They're telling me to start on a bigger context of why this all matters, and then we'll go to phase 2. So here's the context of why this matters. For you, for the people that we are connected to, for our tribe, and this isn't a good or bad, better or worse, it just simply is, we are meant to be way showers. Right? One of the 2 primary wounds that drive us in my tribe are around belonging and power. Relationship to needing to belong and find our place in this world, and relationship to expressing full out. So in the belonging wound at the beginning, it's like, I'm seeking to have you acknowledge me. I'm seeking to have you tell me what I do is okay and valuable. I'm seeking to have you say you want what I've got, right? And if you do want what I've got and you want who I am, then I will have a place in this world. Then I'll belong. And we each, I'm sure every single person in this room, we could talk about your own relationship to belonging, and we'd find the stories. It's funny. Oftentimes when I start my marketing work, we actually do what I call a wound intake, a life PhD session, where we look at your wounds and look at the life PhD derived from them. I can't tell you how many times, like an inordinate amount of times, I start those sessions and I say, so tell me, where'd you grow up? And they say, well, that's a hard question for me to answer, given how many places I lived, right, as army kid or an ambassador's kid or whatever it is. And that to me is like one of the most like blatantly obvious versions of the belonging thing. But we all have it, right? For me, growing up as a gay kid in an evangelical Midwestern family, right, didn't belong. And that belonging is not just to others in this world, but also a sense of belonging to the divine, a sense of belonging to something larger than us. That one took me a while. It wasn't until I really examined, like, oh, I grew up with a punitive God that I had to work to earn salvation from in order to be a part of. Right? That's a God that I couldn't find my way into. So belonging wound even there. And what ends up happening with a belonging wound is that we seek and seek and seek for this external thing that's going to have us land. And when we really move into our leadership, we go, oh, I was never meant to fit in. I was never meant to belong in that way because I meant to lead the way. I meant to be out front with the sickle, carving the path, and then calling back to my tribe, hey, come this way. Right? Here's the path. Right? And every time y'all show up here, that's what I'm doing. Every single month, right? Every single time I go onto Facebook Live, whatever it is, on some level I'm saying like, hey, come on, this is the path. We've got the call. You must come this way. All good, all good. It's just a punctuation for the point. Apparently we really needed to hear that thing. So I want to tie that into this second phase of this on and off again romance with life force. Because inside of the belonging thing, when we're looking for somebody else to validate that we have a place, that's when we run this risk of cutting off from life force. Now, how does that happen? I get an idea, right? And this idea has life force to it. And ideas that have life force to it are what I'm going to call, on some level, future ideas. They're what wants to happen. They're what wants to emerge. And it's just looking for cooperative components for that emergence, right? So it's not what's already been, it's what's yet to be, right? And when we grab onto that, that is when we are paving the path, showing the way, leading up here and calling back to our tribe, right? And it's exciting at first. Right? It's the inspiration comes, the ideas come, ooh, and then we start to see how all the things we've done fit into the thing we're being called into. Oh, I can use this skill and this thing, right? Liz London's over here. She's a fine artist who has art in hotels and businesses and offices and other places, but like a very successful commercial artist, right? But she also has these singing bowls and started working with the singing bowls and then painting and working with singing bowls and painting and really moved into like this sacred art with these singing bowls. And when we talked, she's like, it healed me, you know? And there's something I'm meant to do with that. Now, what's interesting about that is it's inspiring, it's cool, it's like, but it's also threatening. Because this is somebody who's made a living as a commercial artist, right? A successful artist, right? That small seeming little, small group of people that are like, actually make a living being an artist, being a painter. And then I'm going to bring in crystal bowls and healing art? I'm not so sure about that, right? And do I really want to talk about that? And how does that go on my website? And will curators of new buildings be put off by that? And So then we start to discount the inspiration, discount the life force. And we go, okay, And we sometimes do things like, we don't necessarily say it in these words in our head, but essentially we say, how do I dumb this down? Right? How do I make it more acceptable, more commercial, more available? And that question has no life force in it. Right? It actually oftentimes cuts us off from the life force. There is a different question as it relates to how do I communicate this to the people that want it from me so that they really see it, get it, and buy. That's a different question. Right? That stays connected to the life force. But when we ask questions like, how do I make this acceptable? How do I talk about this? What will my mom say? Right? Like, those are the questions that cut us off. And then, but we got the inspiration, so we keep working, right? And because the core of it is still alive, but then in the execution, you know, that people always talk about, like, you know, when you're off by 1 or 2% on a big ocean liner, you'll end up someplace very different than you anticipated, right? And each time we discount this, each time we cut off, we veer a little off. And then we end up way over there when the target is over here, and all the people that want it are over there, and all the buyers, and all the other resources we need, it's all over there. But we're over there. We're 45 degrees off. And there's no customers, and no one seems to buy, and no doors seem to open, and we don't know what we did wrong and why it's not working. And we get super duper frustrated, and we feel like a failure. And we then start to second guess and doubt, was there life force at all? Did I just make that up? Because if it really was guided, wouldn't the doors open and the synchronicity happen and the things flow and the customers come, and wouldn't my life be amazing? But it's not. And I don't know why. And it's one thing when this happens once. It's confusing. But we're talking in phase 2, entering into an on and off again romance. Going back to that drug, having it crash and burn, going back, having it crash and burn, back burn. And eventually it wears at our soul. We don't know if we can trust ourselves anymore. We don't know if we can trust something you might call God or the divine or wherever that inspiration comes from. And now you've probably been at it for a good few years and left whatever stable thing you had, and it's still not working. And so you beat yourself up, and you blame the guidance, and you want to quit. You want to give up. But something deeper inside of you won't let you. So you seem to have no other choice but then to show back up and listen again. And that seems to be the loop. Right? And when I work with a lot of the clients I work with, they're somewhere in that phase 2 loop. Because this life force will always threaten your wounded psychology. This life force will always threaten the way you think your life should be, and how you think you should show up, and what you think you should be doing. Truth is, none of us really know. We really don't know much about it at all. You know, the best we can do is go, I'm clear about this life force right now. Fantastic, right? But beyond that, you know, I have ideas about where my career is going, where my business is going. I have ideas. But I'll tell you, in hindsight, none of them have ever been how I thought it was going to be. Same probably true with you, right? So that's just evidence, like we really don't know, you know? And you know, science actually tells us this planet, this world, is actually moving faster than it's ever moved before. Change is happening at a faster pace than ever before. And I think the larger picture of what's going on is that the faster and faster and faster it goes, the more out of control we feel if we are trying to stay in control. And the invitation in that eventually is to give up the control and move into cooperation. And it really is the shift from control to cooperation that moves us from phase 2 to phase 3. And to me, it is the fear of relinquishing control that is the biggest hidden barrier to moving into that full-time relationship. I'll tell you, for me, what it feels like when I move into phase 3 is it feels like this slipstream, like literally, like, anybody ever been on a slip and slide as a kid, right? Or even just at a water park, those, you know, you go in the tunnel and you're whoosh. It feels like that, right? Like it's fast. And like so fast that like we can't really keep up with our own thoughts and ideas and ways we control life and how fast life goes or can go. We cannot retain control and be in cooperation. Doesn't work, right? So then we have to look at, well, what are all the things we're trying to control? Question 1, what are all the things you're trying to control? And number 2, why are you trying to control them? Right? And I'll tell you, and by the way, if you're in the room or on live stream, you might just make a list. What are the things I'm trying to control? And the second question, why am I trying to control them? Actually, the easier way to answer that is, what's my fear about what would happen if I didn't control them? Because that's why you're trying to control, right? Oftentimes, it's a fear of loss of love. Oh gosh, if I really go into the slipstream, I don't know if I can keep hanging out with the friends that I've been hanging out with for the last 10 years. I don't know if my family is going to understand me or if I'm going to even be able to relate to them anymore. Man, if I have tons of success, I'm not so sure I can handle it. Maybe I don't have my finances dialed in and financial structures put in place, so I might not be able to handle it. Maybe I'm scared about how I've dealt with money and success in the past, and think about the places I'm incongruent in my life and amplify the incongruence tenfold. I was on a call the other week with somebody in my travel marketing program, a 3-month marketing deep dive we do. And this phrase came out, 10x your success, you 10x your mess, right? Wherever the incongruence is, right? We live in earthquake country here in Los Angeles. So if you think about a building that hasn't been retrofit, or even one that has potentially, right? Wherever the weakness is in the foundation of that building, that's where the building's going to crumble, right? So those are the places where we go, oh yeah, that's actually why I'm trying to retain control. Because like, I don't have it all together. And if I move into the slipstream, I don't know what's going to happen, right? We don't trust that slipstream. The truth is, if you actually went into the slipstream might put you right in touch with the perfect resources to shore those incongruencies up. You know, it's been wild to watch in my life over the last year, like all the structural pieces that have been put in place in my business. Just like, oh, like I'm totally right-brained. And there was just like structural pieces being put in place in my business, right? But the slipstream brought all the perfect resources. I'm not doing it. I'm saying yes to that it's being done. I'm cooperating with it being done, right? So I want to speak to control and trust as kind of two linchpins that keep us in the loop in phase 2. The control, as I said, is the fear of what might happen if you weren't in control and what might fall apart or fly off the handle or whatnot. And I gave you the 2 questions for those. I might ask you what they are again, I forget. But the second one, trust. And trust is where it gets really personal. Because there's trust in oneself, there's trust in others, and there's trust in the divine. There's trust in this life force. And what I know about trust is the degree to which you trust yourself is the degree to which you can trust anything else. Others, this life force, anything else. And there's subtle ways we erode trust in ourselves, right? Every time we say we're going to do something and don't, we erode trust in ourselves. Every time we compromise on what's true for us, we erode trust in ourselves. And that erosion happens, I think, even at a deeper level when what we compromise in is what we're most called to do. Right? When we dumb it down, when we try to make it more acceptable, when we try to figure out how it's going to move into the market. And good God, I know this one. Like, there's a reason I grew up in an evangelical home, and part of it is like, part of my role is to be kind of a minister in business, if you will, right? But how the hell do you put that into the world, is the question the mind asks. How do you talk about that? How do you make that acceptable? Who knows? But it's actually the question that prevents it. Whew. That's a big one. It's the question of how do I make this presentable that actually prevents you from connecting with the people it's for. Here's the thing about life force. What's amazing about life force is life force has everything it needs in it, like the way a seed has a whole tree or plant in it, right? Or an acorn has a whole tree in it. It has everything it needs. So here's a couple things that they've been telling me about life force. A, life force exists outside of the time-space continuum. Right? So we, in order to have this thing called life, have this past and have a sense of future and so forth, right? But life force actually lives outside of the time-space continuum. So outside of the time-space continuum, it has everything required for its full expression attached to it. It has everything you needed to go through and learn up until this moment. It has all the other people that need to be part of your past and your future attached to it. Has all the financial resources. It has all the other resources, all connected to it. So it is self-sustaining, but life force cannot unfold on its own. It must have a cooperative component, and that cooperative component is you. When we connect to life force, we become an amplifier of it. That's really what we are. We are amplifiers of this life force. I know when I talk with my team, I have a very unique intellectual property around wounds and marketing and whatnot. I've never seen anything like what I teach out in the world. But it doesn't feel like mine. And I know that it has much bigger reach than the applications for it that I can see. For example, this one right here is developing a whole program of philanthropy connected to core wounds, where you look at what the wound pattern is in your own life and how that pattern is being expressed in your community or society in order to understand what you want to plug into as a philanthropist and how you want to plug into it. It's a much more connected way than just, here's a $3,000 check, right? I would have never seen that. That's not mine to do. That's hers to do, right? So when I stop owning it and saying, this is mine. Now, of course, that doesn't necessarily mean that I might not have trademarks and copyrights and all those things and be rewarded for being someone that has said yes to receiving it and bringing it out to the world. Sure. But I don't have a sense of it being mine. It's a life force that I'm amplifying. And what's been amazing over the last couple of years is all the resources that have come in to help amplify it with me, right? Pat, who was a client and is now the business manager for the company, who came with an amazing freaking assistant. Thank you, Jennifer, we love you. Right? Noah, who some of you know, who runs Ohm Marketing Group, and they do all of the marketing for my company. How did I reconnect with Noah? Noah was in a year-long program I led back in 2013. Almost 2 years ago now, as you'll see later tonight, I sit up here in the second half and I coach some people. We had about 12 minutes left one night, and this guy was like, "Ugh!" And I was like, all right, come on up, right? We'll just do a little quick one. It was Noah. I didn't even recognize him because he had like this big, long, shaggy beard and hair because he'd been like living in Costa Rica or something, right? And I'm like, hey, what's your name? He's like, it's Noah. And I'm like, holy cow, didn't even recognize you, right? But what he was in the hot seat for was he got this guidance. And it said, you're not supposed to be a thought leader anymore. You're not supposed to be the one out front at this point in your life, teaching and leading, even though he had a pretty big following and list and whatnot. No, you're meant to start a marketing company for thought leaders that are really connected to this life force and what wants to flow through, right? And he was freaking out about it. And he's sitting up here and I'm coaching him on that. All the while, and this is the only time this has ever happened, it was kind of surreal because I'm coaching him, but there's other things happening where I'm getting this message like, and Jeffrey, you will be his first client, right? So the evening ends and I'm like, by the way, I think we need to have coffee, right? I think we need to have a talk because I think I'm supposed to be your first client. And sure enough, I was, Then because of the success he started to develop in the company, I was having so many freaking sales calls that like it was taking up all my day. I couldn't keep up with it. And there's this guy I know that had a company that had sales teams. And I kept telling Noah, like, yeah, I think this is the guy we need to talk to, right? And right about when it was like, oh, this is a breaking point, we need to do this, Noah goes to an event, and who does he sit across from at dinner? This guy. They have a 4-hour conversation. I'm like, okay, apparently now it's time to hire that team, right? And just thing after thing after thing. I didn't go looking for it, but it showed up and I said yes, the best I can, right? I had brunch with my buddy Patrick Dominguez the other week, and he's like, yeah, man, it's so wild to watch you build this big business. I never, and we've known each other for like a decade. It's like, I never thought you'd go that route. And I said, you know what's so funny? I didn't either. Like, it wasn't in my cards to build a big business, but a big business seems to want to be built around me. All I'm doing is saying yes. What's been amazing about it is the reason I resisted that for so long is because I've been in this industry for over a decade, and I see so many of my colleagues wear themselves out pushing and pushing and pushing. And I never wanted to be that guy. And you all, I'm guessing, don't want to be that guy or gal either, yeah? Hey, live streamers, do you hear what I'm saying? And that seems to be the conundrum when it feels like, oh, I'm supposed to have this bigger expression. I'm supposed to do this bigger thing in the world, and everybody in my tribe has that feeling, yes? Yeah, there's a bigger thing that wants to happen through me. So that wants to happen, but at the same time, I don't want it that way. I don't want the massive overhead that ends up cutting me off from my guidance and says we just need to produce and make our numbers and essentially drive myself into a day job that eventually I work 60 or 80 hours a week at and kill myself over. And I've seen people in my industry that end up down that road. Never wanted that, you know? And I don't have it. You know, like I work average days, probably a 40-hour work week, whatever. I almost never, ever work on the weekends. You know, I'm always going to live shows and concerts with my partner. Like, I have a life because I have no interest in doing it otherwise, right? But what's been interesting is as I've said yes and shown up to this life force, all the resources in perfect time come right in. They don't pour in like a big bucket just over your head, right? No, that's not elegant, and this universe is elegant, right? It's like piece by piece by piece, essential building blocks that all build upon one another until only in retrospect can you see what's been going on-ish. That's more like how it works, right? And the key here is I'm not doing it. The life force is unfolding. And I'm in relationship with the life force. That is the key. Because the moment I cut off from that and try to do it myself, and every now and again I catch myself, I'll tell you, those are the things that flop. Those are the emails that go unopened. Those are the programs that have low enrollment. Those are the things that flop. And when they flop, I just go, oh. Yep, I made that one up. That one didn't actually have life force. I made it up. Made sense. Good idea from a business perspective, but it had no life force. You know? Years ago, my old business partner Suzanne and I had a bunch of DVD home study programs, boxes of them. We wanted to move them, right? So we did a video launch. We hired a guy for $5,000 to teach us how to do this video launch. We did a video launch. We made $5,000. Now, a lot of work to do a big video launch, right? Hours and hours and hours, weeks upon weeks. Afterwards, the message I got was, Jeffrey, you were trying to move product, and your job is to move people. Moving product had no life force in it. Moving people does. Right? These days, for the longest time when I would scan an email before we send it out, I kind of look for, is there a logical, in marketing we say people buy with emotion and justify with logic. So I look to see, like, is there logic there where we go, oh, I see why I should go. I see why I should click yes or put in my credit card or do whatever. My mind is congruent with that. Okay, good. Is there resonance? Is there emotion? Is there connectivity? Okay, cool, great, right? And I know for my tribe and what I train my clients in is to look for archetypal themes that connect you and your tribe. For me, it's around belonging and power. So I need to see, are those elements in my copy? But lately, we're doing those two things, but the third and really primary thing we're doing when we scan is we look at it and say, does it have life force? Does this message, does this idea, does this subject line, whatever it is, does it have life force? I wouldn't say we're 100% on top of it all the time, but that's the direction we're going more and more and more and more. So I want to break down the difference between a good idea and life force, and then I want to talk about the transition from phase 2 to phase 3. A lot of my people in my tribe, they're smart, quick, right? I like being around smart, quick people. So lots of ideas, right? Always in the hopper. Ooh, I could do this. Ooh, I could do that. Ooh, I could do this. Right? And then the question becomes, well, which ones of those are life force and which ones are just ideas that are exciting? Right? The first thing I'd say is there's a lot of ideas that can excite your mind. Right? And those are ideas you made up. Not bad or good, but they're ideas you made up. They excite the mind. Ooh, right? Oh, I've got this good one. I used to, oh, this is embarrassing. I'm going to say it. So I used to live in San Francisco, and I lived in the Castro, which is like the gay neighborhood, or the gayborhood as we would call it. In that city, the underground train that goes from downtown out into the neighborhoods, a lot of them go right through the Castro and then split off. So it's this big commute hub, the Castro. A lot of people come out of the trains and onto bus lines and stuff to go home and to get to work. Well, this would have been before I became a coach, when I just knew Microsoft was dead, but I didn't know it was next, right? And I just have ideas. And I just thought this was the coolest idea. So I'm a big foodie. I love good food and wine. And there was no good meat market in the Castro. In fact, there wasn't even a good grocery store back then in that neighborhood. So I was like, there's all this foot traffic and all this commute traffic of people going home where they need to cook dinner. I'll create a meat market, but I'll do a play on words in the neighborhood and call it the Castro Meat Market. And I'm just going to keep going because it's so bad. But I was going to have this like kind of leather theme with like daddies on the meat side and then like lesbians as the fishmongers on this side, and like have it just be like all a big cheesy play on the Castro Meat Market. And so I started reading entrepreneurial books because I was still at Microsoft. And every single one of them, to a T, in the first chapter says, you've got to love your product. I was like, I don't know a damn thing about being a butcher, and I don't care about me. I just think it's a cool marketing idea, you know? But you got to love it, you got to love it. And I was like, okay, apparently I'm not supposed to run that business. Right? So that's like an idea business. It's fun. There's a little like mental masturbation to it, like, woo, it's exciting. But there's no life force. There's not an animating idea beyond your own mind. When I started channeling in my 20s, in my early 20s, I was living in Minneapolis. And I had one of those big, you guys won't even know what these are, I don't think. I had one of these big CRT monitors with a gateway computer. You know, they have that big back. They're like massive monitors and a big tower computer. And my gateway. You remember gateways? Like Gateway and Dell back in the day. So I had this gateway computer, and I still can remember this day. I'm journaling and I'm typing on my computer. And I'm looking up at this screen. And the words that are coming out are ideas I've never thought. In fact, it's much wiser than anything I had ever thought. And so I started asking the computer screen questions. And then I'd listen for the response and just type whatever the response was. And I started this back and forth dialogue with the computer screen. And that's how I started channeling. And it was like a year or two later, I was in a spiritual bookstore and picked up Conversations with God that had just come out. And I was like, oh, that's what I do, right? This back and forth dialogue, that's what I do. But I will never forget the sensation when I saw these words on the screen. Wow, I've never thought those thoughts. That's so much wiser than I am. There's animating ideas in it that I've never had. That is life force, right? My experience also is, and some of you are more kinesthetic than others, but oftentimes when it's life force, it has this kinesthetic feel. Maybe you feel it in your gut or belly, maybe up the back of your neck, right? Maybe your arms, hairs stand up, but there's an excitement. The other thing that to me is a telltale sign that it's life force is that it's a little scary. It doesn't necessarily make sense. So I'm just using you all as examples tonight, but Bob and I had a conversation just this past week. Do you mind if I talk about it? All right. So Bob, at last month's event, he's like, hey, could we have a conversation? It's like, I'm feeling called to do this work around gay men and intimacy and relating. Could I talk to you about it? And I'm like, sure, but you weren't gay, are you? And he's like, no. But like a third of my clients are, and I just feel like I'm called to do this. And I'm like, okay, sure, we can have a conversation, right? And we had this conversation, and the more I got into it, I was like, holy shit, Bob, like there is life force in this. Doesn't make sense on paper, right? It's not the obvious direction to take as business. It's not like his brilliant idea to hang his shingle around this idea. No. It showed up and kept showing up and kept showing up. And then he said, yeah, when I've talked to other people about it, like the response is amazing. It's overwhelming. And I'm doing my first workshop in New York, and then I'm doing one in LA. Is there a website for it, by the way?
On its way.
.com. Great. You'll have to tell us what it is. You have to tell us. So there is a website on its way. I'll post it on my Facebook page when you have it. But that's life force. It's edgy. Like, it's a little scary to be like a straight guy who's like, yeah, I'm putting on workshops for gay men and intimacy. Right? Like, what gives you that right? Right? What do you know about me? Right? That could be what the mind says could be the feedback. And if he paid attention to that and tried to do something different to make it acceptable the way we talked about, that actually would be the experience he would get. But so far from what I can hear, that's not been what he's been doing. What he's been doing instead is staying connected to the life force and just saying, okay, and talk to this person and do this and set up this workshop in New York and then do one in LA. And he's just saying yes. So guess what the response is? Yes. Yes. You say yes to us, we'll say yes to you. That's how it works. Because guess what? The idea that caught him, he didn't catch it, it caught him, right? And then he agreed to it. He said, okay, I'll partner with you, idea, right? It landed, it caught him, and all of you have had that experience, comes and get you, right? It catches you. And you wrestle maybe for a bit, and then either you say, okay, I will be your partner, life force. I will be the amplifier for this idea, right? Part of that amplification, by the way, is the nuts and bolts, like setting up a place to have a workshop, advertising the workshop, talking with other people, right? But in that very inspired way, right? Where like you pay even special attention to these little synchronicities. Like Bob's like, oh yeah, you're the third person that said the name of that book. Okay, I'll go get it, right? Like your antenna is up, you're staying in communication, you're staying in relationship, and there's one thing after the other. And as you do it, all the resources and all the people and all the people that are meant to be in his workshops, the perfect amount for the first time, are all connected to the life force. So long as you're connected to it, it's going to flourish. There is no way other than that. But if he would have said, oh God, I'm embarrassed, this is weird, what are my straight male clients going to say about this? And then try to execute on it? Yeah. Now we're back over there instead of over here, right? Where no customers are and there's no aliveness and it all falls apart, right? I will say one other thing because just because it's fun and there's so much life force in it. He's like, yeah. He's like, when you think about, on this conversation we had, when you think about how you cut into a guy, what do you call him? You call him a faggot. It's like one of the biggest cuts, whether you're gay or straight, call him a faggot, right? And so where this work is eventually going is having gay and straight men do healing work together around their masculinity. Can you feel the life force in that? Like hair standing up, like, whoa, that's a big idea. That's risky, right? It's a big idea, but there is life force in it. Now, here's the cool thing. If he can stay connected to that, sky's the limit.
At this point in my head, I'm like, how the fuck am I going to market that?
Right. And that's the question. How the fuck am I going to market that? That's a question that can take you off course over here. The questions when you're staying connected to the life force are, what am I meant to do now? Who am I meant to talk to? What about this idea has found its way to me as a place of expression? In other words, why me? And of course, you're the perfect vehicle for it. Otherwise, it wouldn't have landed in your lap. What's the bigger picture about what this is about in the world? Which people need this? Why do they need it? What would I need to say to them for them to understand that this is the thing they've been waiting for? How do I position it for them to say, oh, I've been waiting. I didn't even know that's what I wanted, but I've been waiting for it. How do I position it so that that occurs? And of course, there's more and more questions. The key, however, is you do not ask your mind these questions. You ask the life force. Because all the intelligence for its complete expression live inside of the life force. And that is the quintessential shift. I need to figure it out. Oh no, it's all there. Everything I need, in perfect timing, it's all right there. I just ask the life force. Just tune into that. Right? And when you think that there's a question you should be asking and you get nothing back, again, two responses there. One is, what's wrong? That'll send you over there. The other one is, oh, that must not be the right question right now. So then the question becomes, what's the question I should be asking right now? right? Oftentimes when I journal with guidance or intelligence or whatever, my favorite question at the end is, anything else? And sometimes, no, not so much. But sometimes the response is basically like, finally, I'm glad you got all your questions out of the way because here's what we really want to talk to you about, right? Out it comes. Sometimes I don't know what the questions are to ask, and I start by saying, what questions should I be asking about this? And I download what the questions are, and then I go ask them, and then I download the answers, right? Staying in connection to the life force. So there's one more, I always say one more, I never know if it is. I don't know how to get that out of my vocabulary, but anyway. There's another. There's a piece that is the linchpin that moves, in my experience, moves us from phase 2 to phase 3. From the back and forth relationship to trust and the back and forth giving and taking away of control. And it is grace. And when I said at the beginning of this talk, hey, I'm going to speak to your mind, and there might be some heart stuff here and some emotional connection, but then there's this third thing I want you to pay attention to, and that's grace. I define grace as receiving benevolence that you did not work to earn. In fact, receiving benevolence that you could not work to earn. Because on some level, unbeknownst to us very consciously, I think what a lot of people in our tribe are doing, unconsciously, is still trying to prove our worth and value. I'm going to work, I'm going to produce, I'm going to do it, I'm going to bring it out into the world, and then I'll be validated. And if I'm validated, then I'll belong, and then I'll feel free. Right? And so there's this need from the wound to keep pushing and keep struggling and keep taking control back to prove that we can do it, and to prove that we can succeed, and to prove that we have value, and look at everything I've done. Of course I have value in this world. And that cannot happen in full-time partnership. That is what is underneath the on and off again romance in phase 2. And in my experience, we cannot muscle our way through that. It's oxymoronic. The whole thing is already a big muscle fest, right? The only thing that breaks that dam, in my experience, is grace. And the only two things we can do to receive grace are to ask and open. Just to ask and then open to receive it. That's it. And what happens as we let down our guard enough to experience grace is that there's a whole new relationship of trust with that life force. Where we aren't trying to use it to prove our value. Because that is what happens in phase 2. Unconsciously, we are trying to use these inspired ideas. We are trying to use the life force to prove our value. But like I said earlier when I was talking about my work, I don't think about my work as mine. I think about it as work that's happening through me. Right? Pat, when we've been working together over the last year, she keeps kind of checking. Like, for the longest time, she was waiting for me to take the control back, right? No, it's mine, my work. I need the validation. I need the praise. And I keep saying, no, Pat, it's not my work, right? I've partnered with it, and I'm staying in a partnership with it. But I'm very clear that I'm not the only one connected to it. You're connected to it, Noah's connected to it, the sales team's connected to it, all sorts of resources are connected to it. Many of whom I haven't even met yet. Some of whom I already met, right? I'm just doing my piece. That is my only job, to show up as best I can and do my piece. And what's been interesting is the more and more I do that, the more and more fun it becomes. I was going to say funner. The funner and funner it becomes. The more and more fun it becomes, right? Like, for example, some of you have heard me share this story of back when I was CEO for Max Simon's company and like hating my life because I was trying to lead his company his way, and I'm not him. And I went to Australia, and I stayed with my buddy Taki Moore for a week, and I watched him work. His guest house was part of his office, overlooking the Sydney Bay. He had this drafting table, and he would pull this paper over, this butcher paper, over the drafting table, and he'd take a Sharpie, and he'd draw a square, and he'd draw some stuff, and he'd take out his iPhone, take a snapshot, and then pull some more paper over it and do it again. I'm like, Taki, what are you doing? He's like, oh, I'm making a PowerPoint. I was like, what? He goes, oh yeah. He's like, I hate computers. I mean, he does all online marketing, right? Not all, but he's a huge online marketer. He has a multi-million-dollar business. And he's like, oh, I hate computers. I'm like, wait, what? He's like, yeah, each one of these squares is a PowerPoint slide. And I just draw it, and I take a picture, and I text it to my designer. And then they turn it into PowerPoint slides, and that's what I use to present. And I'm like, it blew me away. It just blew me away. Because here I was trying desperately to run this other company in a way that was absolutely unaligned with my design, hating myself and feeling like a total helpless failure. And here I'm watching this guy with some butcher paper and a Sharpie creating a PowerPoint deck. It was the beginning of a new life for me, right? One of the things that Pat and I have discovered is like, I'm super auditory, if you can't tell, right? In fact, Pete, my boyfriend, was here at the last month's event, and he has a degree in English from Berkeley, which is one of the best English schools in the world. His father was an English professor, and afterwards it's like, you're the one that should have the English degree. Like, because for whatever reason in my design, like, I'm articulate and I have language. I don't even know where or why or where it came from. I don't, but it's there. But lately, anybody of you ever used a Voxer? Right? It's like this back and forth walkie-talkie thing where you just like, you just hop on, here's Jennifer, my assistant, and be like, hey Jennifer, we're in the event right now. You're probably watching right now, but I thought I'd send you a Vox. We'll talk tomorrow, bye, right? And when we're in meetings and we have stuff for like, oh, we need this to, like I just Vox. I just send these Voxes out to everybody, right? And by the end of the meeting, like it's all been done. And I didn't write a damn thing. Then there's this software called Loom where like you can make these videos of your computer screen. So like I have this PDF I needed to review for my marketing team on the design. And like I had all these notes and I was procrastinating because I thought I needed to like write this detailed description of my feedback. And I was like, oh, no, a Loom, right? So that's been my latest new thing is I just Loom it all. And I like make this video and I'm like, hey gang, all right, so here's my feedback. Page 1, that looked good. Page 2, this image is wrong and here's why. Here's the kind of image we want instead. Let's go to page 3. 5 minutes later, all the feedback is done. Boop, one button, send to Loom, right? Like life gets so much fun. And because this company and this team is being built around me, all the crap I hate to do, I don't do anymore, right? So my old fear of, if I really say yes to this thing and have this big company around me, like I'll be one of those slaves who's like dying because of this company, that's not happening at all. Like, I'm having more fun than I've ever had running my company, doing more of what I love and very little of crap that don't want to do. It's amazing, right? And what's so cool is because I'm partnering with a life force, the people that are being brought in to support this work are all like committed to the work, you know? Like they are as much in service to it as I am. Well, that makes sense because it is not my work. It's our work. Remember, that life force has all the resources attached to it, right? All the other people, all the other customers, but all the other support attached to it. So Pat and Jennifer and Noah and my sales team and all these other people, like they're attached to it, not to me. And that's the big distinction. And because of that, they're as committed to this as I am. You know? Like my enrollment specialist, my sales teams, when we first connected, it wasn't working so well. And I was like, oh, man. And I pulled some recordings, and I listened. I was like, oh, they're selling this like it's anything else in the world, and I know it's not. So I called them in. I'm like, hey, let me actually bring you through some of this work and have you experience it. Right? And these are like seasoned professionals who've been in enrollment specialists for 17 years or more. And we did this work, and I had them on together so they could watch the processes and experience the processes, right? And they were like, oh my God, we've been in this for 17 years. We've never seen anything like this, right? Like, we loved this work. And they knew exactly who it was for and why they needed it. And they started having a 65% enrollment rate. And the least expensive program I have normally is $3,000, and then it goes to $7,500, then $20,000, and up from there. So this is not like little baby programs. But they know who it's for. And they know that the customers that are meant for this work are also all attached to the life force. So they don't even have to push. They just need to find the ones that are already attached to it and help them see. That's it. Right? So this is the invitation. Remember at the beginning I said, your job is to like get the sickle out and clear the path and say, hey, come on, gang. Notice that I'm doing it tonight. Like I'm sharing with you the picture of my experience of building this bigger business and how it's being built around me, and that I don't have to push it and I'm not killing myself to do it. Like, that's me going, hey, this way. There is a way. There's a path that doesn't require you to martyr yourself en route. The life force is going to want to keep playing, right? It's frisky. It wants to like. So one last thing, maybe, and then I'll see. How are we doing? Oh, good. So I just want to say a piece about grace. And why I believe it's a requirement to do this. As I said, the life force will always pull you into work that, man, oh, it's challenging to your personality. It is the thing that makes your personality go, oh, God, I don't know. Do I really want to be seen that way? Will it work? It seems crazy. You know, for me, this whole I remember years ago, one of my big moments of surrendering into grace, I think at the event in November, we're going to do a concert, and I'll do the whole EP. But there's a song that came through when I was writing. I recently wrote some songs for this EP, and it's one song called Light of Your Grace. And it's built around this moment I had. I'd left Microsoft, I'd gone to coaching school. I thought I'd answered my calling. I did it. And it wasn't working. And I love that, I beat my way into finding a niche. And it didn't work. I tried everything there was. I went to all the people that teach it. And none of it worked for me. Which of course is why I have to teach niche today. Right? In a very different way. But I was just lost. And I didn't know what to do. And I was reaching, I'd cashed out stock options to pay rent. And was reaching the end of that. And I'm like, okay, uncle, I give up. And I just gave up one morning. And the give up of the fight is part of the surrender, which makes room for the grace. The give up of the fight is part of the surrender, which makes room for the grace. So after I gave up, I remember I was at my little breakfast table, and I just got up and I took a shower. And in the shower, I hear this message. Because I'm just like, who am I supposed to be serving? And I hear this message. Who do you want to serve? And I was like, oh, spiritual people. And I hear this next question. Which ones? I was like, one's in business, I guess, because they could afford me, right? Little did I know that it'd lead me to working with entrepreneurs in the way that I do now. But again, life force. There was just enough room for me to open up and receive grace. And I just had this little, inspired thought. And I got out of the shower and I went to my computer and I Googled spirituality in business or spirituality in the workplace or whatever. And there was the Center for Spirituality in the Workplace. Right up on top of Google. Click on it. The first early organization doing this work in corporate. And at the time I thought corporate meant business because I'd come from Microsoft. And I clicked on the contact page and filled out the little form. And I was like, hi, I'm this coach in San Francisco, and I kind of am interested in this field. If you have any information, let me know. All right. 20 minutes later, my phone rings. Pick it up. It's like, hi, this is Martin Root, the founder of the Center for Spirituality in the Workplace. Oh, hi. This is the guy that co-wrote Chicken Soup for the Soul at work with Jack Canfield and blah, 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 right? We had a 2-hour conversation where he's like, he was like, it's good to re-meet you, brother. And we're still dear friends to this day, And it was just the give up of the fight that created enough surrender to receive grace. And grace is something as simple as an inspired thought because something has been touched in me that then comes back with a phone call. Sometimes it's as simple as that. But there is this piece around grace when we go, I'm willing to receive it. Help. And yes, I'm willing to receive. Where I feel like grace is this elixir, this liquid almost, that pours into us and finds the nooks and crannies where we're still in judgment of ourselves, where we still haven't reconciled our discordant relationship with some aspect of ourselves, where we still have shame or grief or anger, rage, right? And for whatever reason, we can't seem to get at it or touch it. Anybody know what I'm talking about here? Right? Those little nooks and crannies. And man, those of us that are personal development junkies, we do our damnedest to go after every nook and cranny. Oh, I'm going to go and I'm going to do my work, right? Which is still that thing of I'm going to be in control on some level, right? Can be. But grace says, oh, you don't need to know how to touch that. You don't need to have a process for that. You don't need to know how it's going to be resolved. All you need to do is ask and be willing to receive. That's it. And in that place, we become the person more and more and more that is willing to stay in full-time partnership. It's grace that allows us to move into that space. It's grace that tenderizes us to open up and be in partnership. And for most of us that have been pushing and striving and struggling and working and trying to get it done, and it's still not working, my invitation is to ask for and then open up to receive grace.
I was imagining a chicken tenderizer.
Chicken tenderizer. So we have some time. We'll do a couple hot seats tonight. It's been a couple months since we've done some hot seats. So let me set you up just on what we do. I'll bring you up here. We have a microphone. You'll be on microphone in front of the camera, sharing, being a voice for all of us. And so if you're in a place around life force, like struggling with a life force, wondering where it is, or have something that's been called of you that you're struggling to say yes to, that could be one reason to come up. If this conversation around grace has touched you in some way and you want to explore that, that could be another reason to come up. Or if the life force tells you it's you and the qualifiers I gave don't match, that could be another reason to come up. So let me pull these up. And like I said, with my team, the question I'm asking more and more of the team when we're trying to make strategic decisions is just this: is there life force? And so if you're wondering, ooh, should I raise my hand, should I come up, whatever, just ask, is there life force for me? And we'll start with Bob. Come on up, man. So, what's cooking?
It's more of what you were talking about, this work, the more immediate work of working with gay men around relating in intimacy. So there's, just kind of throw it out there and see what happens. There's two kind of seem, they're not like 100% connected in my mind at this point. So one of the things, well, number one, the moment you started feeding your experience of me and this work back to me, just my whole body softened. It felt really good to have it fed back to me in that way. So thank you. And it got me present as you were talking to this thought that I hadn't totally been conscious of in my mind of like, what if my whole business becomes coaching gay men and like doing intimacy and relating workshops again? And like part of me is like, no, I don't want that. And I don't even know if that's what it's going to turn into, but it just got me really present to this place where I'm in for the next steps. And then there's almost this way where I'm kind of imagining out in the future and kind of putting a damper on it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I want for all of you to think about where, if you have a life force thing calling to you, where you might be doing that yourself, right? Like where the immediate thing is like, okay, I'm in, but then when you extrapolate it out into your vision of what it might be, you're like, yeah.
But none of it looks like that.
Right. So I want to speak to a few things. One is one of the pieces of work that my buddy Tim Kelly taught me years ago that I still do with my clients is something around setting conditions. So the partnership, if you think about partnership is not servitude. Servitude says, I'll do it no matter what, right? There is a martyrdom to servitude. I did not say servitude. I said partnership. In partnership, you have a say, right? If you ever think about a romantic partnership, a marriage or dating or whatever, like two entities come together in service to the relationship. And both parties might have some requirements, right? Now, a good relationship, most of those requirements you both share, right? But sometimes there's a couple things you've got, right? So I remember a few years ago, I'd moved to LA. I was in Marina Del Rey, living in Marina Del Rey, and there's that bike path. And I was on my bike one day, and just having this conversation, right? And this was after that Australia trip where I saw Taki make PowerPoint on butcher paper, and I knew stuff was shifting, and I got the first whiffs of like where this might be going, right? And I could like feel the bigness of it. And I said, okay, I'm in, I'll go. But I won't do it alone. You know, like I could do it alone, but I won't. And I like need somebody by my side, somebody in my corner, somebody for me to go home to. You know, I have a life of service where I work with a lot of people, but I needed my guy in my corner to come home to. And, you know, it's really been in the last year and a half that all of this has started to really unfold, from the business and all the business resources. And, you know, Pete and I met 10 months ago. And from day one, it was like, yep, this is the guy. And he keeps showing up, and it keeps proving to be true. You know? So that was a condition for me, because I knew I could be alone and do it. I didn't want to, right? That's a partnership thing versus servitude. So one of the things I do in this exercise is you start by thinking about all your fears about really saying yes to what you feel this might call you into, right? So give me an example of some fears. You already listed one, like I'm just going to be known as like the straight guy that does workshops with gay guys.
And that's going to be the only thing.
And that's all I ever do.
That's kind of, yeah, so that's...
So great, and then tell me what the fears are of, if that were true, then what are the concerns?
It's hard to put words to. It just feels like there's... It's hard. It feels... It's hard to even put words to. Yeah.
So just see if you can feel how it feels, and see if there's any words.
It feels
that-
limiting.
Ah, there we go.
Yeah.
And when I feel limited, that makes me feel how?
Not in control.
Uh-huh. And when I don't feel like I'm in control, then I feel how?
Unsafe.
Yeah, it doesn't feel safe, right? And when it doesn't feel safe, it feels like what might happen is
Hell on earth.
yeah, it all falls apart.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, in order to say yes and like really be a yes, are there conditions that are like, oh, I really need this as a condition?
I'm laughing in my head as you started talking about Pete, but before you said romantic partner, you said partner. And literally the other thing that I had in my head as I came up is I want somebody to hold these spaces with me.
Uh-huh.
And not just for one of them. I don't know if this is a partner or if it's an apprentice, but somebody who knows how to hold space
Yep.
and who I can trust deeply. And it would be awesome if it was a gay man.
Yeah, that would make a lot of sense.
It would.
Yep.
Yeah.
So great, that's a condition. You know, I have someone that is supporting this work, either as a partner or someone that holds space or what have you. And let me ask you, if you had that, does with that come a greater sense of safety? No.
Yeah.
See, and you can feel that. Right? So this is the work to go, for all of you, to list all the fears, doubts, worries, concerns you can think of. Even if some part of you thinks, oh, that's dumb. Oh, that'll never happen. Oh, I don't need to be worried about that. Well, sure, the part that says you don't need to be worried about it doesn't need to be worried about it, but the part that is worried about it is the part you're doing this for, right? So step one, this really easy exercise, list everything you can think of. Step two, look at the conditions you would need to say yes, that are really like true, you know? Like, I need to be making $10 million a month. No, that's not a condition, right? Oh, I have a roof over my head that feels like a sanctuary. That might be a condition, right? Mm-hmm. So you write conditions. And then the third thing you do is write strategies, which is, great, is there anything I need to do that feels inspired as a next step strategy to help make these conditions be true, right? For me, when I had the I'm not going to do it without somebody in my corner, I knew that intimacy was a bugaboo for me, right? Like, la, 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 I can just ignore that part. Well, then my strategy was like, no, I've got to do some work in that arena. And I did tantra work, I did other work, like these gay men's workshops on intimacy. I hired some coaches for a while. Like I did some of the excavation that needed to happen in order for that to create the conditions for that condition to appear, right? And then when I met Pete, it was like seemingly out of thin air. It's like one day, not in my life, the next day, from the day we met, it's been like, yep, and we're just like together, right? So, yeah, the third thing here, what are some of the strategies you need to employ to make the conditions be true, right? Inspired strategies. Because there's lots of crap you can do. What are you meant to do, right? So that's the first place I would have you go and have everyone go. And that's an exercise that done right might take you a little bit of time, right? And when I do this, like authentically, I keep that list sort of present and available and I have these, oh, this, and I add to it, like it's a living document, right? So that's the first thing I would say. And then, so in my tribe, I talked about belonging and power. So there's this very well could poke at a belonging thing, because it's just like, on the surface, it's weird, right? It's different. Like, wait, what? But here's the thing. Here's what you've got to know. Oftentimes, the way we think about these things, when we think, oh, God, I don't know, seems weird, seems different, we think about it out there, right? You think about it like someone else hearing about it, it being on a website, out there, something out there. And it just floating out there, yeah, maybe it is weird because the way it's happening in your mind has no life force in it out there. But the interesting thing is, as you're sitting here and you talk about it, it actually sounds like the most natural thing in the world. Yeah? Yeah. Like it doesn't actually feel weird, sound weird. It's like, oh, wow, that's really unique, but great, right? And so there's also like the ability, you guys know I do a lot of parts work with people, which are, what's the part of me that is freaked out or that's worried about X, Y, or Z or whatever, right? So sometimes you can find parts that are like, really feel like they're being poked at by this calling. So if you were to tune into the parts of you that are, and I want to have you all scan yourselves in one area and then another. So first I want you to think about the belonging arena, which is, what are people going to think? How am I going to be perceived or judged? What if this is the only thing I do? So what part of you feels concerned about that?
Yeah, it's so kind of wispy still, hard to put my finger on.
So I want you to think about your masculinity,
Mm-hmm.
And I want you to think about who you were as a little boy. I'll tell you, Bob.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of cultural energy you're tapping into, or that this idea is tapped into,
Yeah.
right? Around what it means to be a man.
Yeah.
Right? And so I want you to think about who you were as a boy and your fears as a boy around being a man, growing up, showing yourself.
Yeah, if I put the sexuality piece aside for just a moment and check into that, it's funny, not funny, because I just got a deep piece of insight. I went to a men's retreat just last weekend with my father. Just like, never thought that might happen. Mm-hmm. And it shed a lot of light on, how do I even put this into words, what it means to be a man. Have a lot of wounding and a lot of pain about what I don't think it means to be a man.
Yeah. Yeah.
Going toward him.
Yeah. Yeah. So here's the place I want to point you. Originally I said we were going to scan in the belonging area, which is, what are people going to think? How is it going to be perceived?
Feels less
et cetera.
like belonging to me.
It's not, actually.
Yeah.
This is the power wound.
Yeah.
This is all about power. When we get into the power wound, here's the wild thing. On some level, we must become the whole archetype of our perpetrator.
The first thought that popped through my head is, oh my God, it's hard to say. I have a lot of judgment. The first thought that popped through my head is, what, so I need to be a pussy?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the whole archetype. The perpetrator and our wounding around it is that that's a wounded expression of the archetype. It's a fragmented expression. And part of the wounding is that we were in relationship with the wounded expression. So our fear of moving towards it is, I'm going to be the thing that I hate. That wounded me, right? when the reality is you alchemize it as you move towards it and become the whole complete expression of the thing, which isn't the wounded expression.
Yeah. And it's one of the things I'm acutely aware of is there's still so much pain in front. I can barely see what's on the other side.
Yeah. You don't need to see what's on the other side.
Yeah.
Not your job. Not your job. But the pain you feel here, that's the place to invite grace.
Yeah. I'm good at that.
Yeah, good. That's the, I can't even call it work. That's the invitation.
Mm-hmm.
And as you do that, like I told you when we were on the phone the other day, like I feel more and more like a man than I ever have before in my life. Mm-hmm. And as this larger and larger business is growing around me, like I've got to be more of a CEO than I've ever been in my life. And I've really moved from practitioner into CEO and practitioner into thought leader. I still do some work as a practitioner in my business, but I also run my business, right? With a lot of great support. And you damn well better believe I had some wounding around what it means to be a powerful white male in this world, right? Especially as a gay guy. Like, ooh, I don't want that. Well, guess what? In order to answer my calling, I have to become the thing that I said I never wanted to be. But in the process, I become the alchemized version of it. That's what you're being called into. Mm-hmm. That's why it feels so frickin' scary and risky.
And it feels really right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And I'm wondering in this moment, it's like my mind projects out in the future and it's like, oh, what if? And I know that you spoke to this too, every time I put my mind out in the future and say, oh, what if, or this is how I want it to be, it's just God's got something so much different. And what you're speaking to here, that feels so much like why I'm on this earth.
Yeah.
I don't know what it looks like yet.
Not your job.
No.
Never your job. Do create some conditions that help you deal with the what ifs a bit, right? Mm-hmm. If there are some deal breaker conditions, like me having a partner in my life was a deal breaker, for you having someone support this work in that way with you is a deal breaker. If there's some deal breakers, name them, right? Mm-hmm. And then if there's any inspired strategies to move towards that, great. If there's not, don't worry about it. The inspired strategies will find you, right? Once you say yes to that, the conditions for it to be true will show up. Cool?
Mm-hmm.
Good stuff. Mm-hmm. Jess is foxing me back. Let's do a very short one, and then we're gonna wrap here.
Okay, I've had a cough, so I'm hoping I can make it this.
All right. Ooh. All right. So what's the life force thing calling? What's that thing asking of you?
Well, it's very strong, and what it's calling me to do is to deliver structures that have to do with human connection. Mm-hmm. And that have to do with technology and documenting our life force, basically our ability, structures, even through traditional institutions such as healthcare, dealing with cancer patients and such, using these technologies so that we can basically connect with the divine.
So that what happens?
So that each individual can have that open channel accessible to them all the time. Mm-hmm. And whether it's for healing or, most importantly, just to know who they are.
Yeah. and to do it in an agnostic form is what I'm hearing.
Yes, for the mainstream public.
Yep.
Yes.
Yep.
Giving people what they don't get otherwise as far as deep human connection, but with the bottom line goal of knowing their own divinity,
All
their
right.
own connection.
So here's why you need to come up here for this.
Okay.
So one of the things that my guidance keeps saying to me about this life force conversation is that you cannot create from the future if you have not yet reconciled the past,
Okay.
right? And from the future means it's the thing that's in this ball of energy that hasn't necessarily materialized yet because you're here to help it materialize, right?
Right. Yes.
So from the future, from the past, right?
Okay.
So you cannot create from the future until you've reconciled the past. And I feel like part of this technology, and I watched a Facebook Live that Brene Brown did a few days ago about Charlottesville. It really touched me deeply. I mean, I've just been like this whole week, I've just felt this like tearing open in our country and in my heart. And I haven't known my place to be in relationship to it. And part of her conversation was that if we don't own our story, we are destined to repeat it. Right? And she talked about her book, The Gifts of Imperfection, and when she wrote that, that was part of her actually owning her story. And part of what she was talking about with Charlottesville and race in our country is that we haven't owned our story, right? I heard a thing on NPR where this guy was being interviewed, and there was this hashtag, this is not us, right? And he was like, no, this is us. This is us. It might not be who we want to be, but this is us, right?
Okay. Yes.
There's another thing, so I'm just here to share a few stories. I do some meditation with this guy named Adyashanti, this meditation teacher. So I sometimes do his 5 or 7 day sits. And a few years ago, he started teaching about Jesus.
Yeah.
He's a Zen Buddhist doing Jesus teachings, right? Best person ever to do Jesus teachings, by the way.
Yeah.
And what he said was, yeah, you know, in the East, if something goes wrong in somebody's life, they just go, oh, that's karma. I must have been bad. It must have been something not working in my life. He said, but in the West, because we have this thing about original sin, we go, ooh, I'm rotten. I'm bad, right? And he said, because of that, he said his experience with Zen never touched that in us.
Yeah.
And he said, what the people in the West need is a redemptive love. And the reason he got into teaching Jesus stuff is Jesus was a teacher of redemptive love, right? And this is from somebody that is a Zen Buddhist. Like, he's not out to proselytize or be a Christian or any of that, but to teach redemptive love through that particular lens. And there's something I hear about what you're being called to do. I'll even say one more thing. All of my work, at its fundamental core, is about the integration of seeming opposites.
Yes.
Right?
Crave and fear. Yes.
If we were doing certain types of work, you'd call it the masculine and the feminine. In my work, I might look at it more from the owned and the disowned, the elevated and the despised, right? Those are the playgrounds I hang out in. Because until we find this integration point, we stay in these loops, right?
Yes.
And we do that in ourselves, and we do that in our culture. Ooh, don't want to look at that, brush that under the rug, elevate this. And it keeps us in cycles, right?
Yes.
So one of the things I remember Adia talking about was that a lot of enlightenment teachings are like up and out. You know, kind of escapism, if you will. That's one way to look at it, right? But I know for me and the people in my tribe, we are down and in. We are here to bridge this consciousness into this earth and into our being, our cellular structure, right? And we cannot do that if we haven't learned to embrace our humanity.
Yeah. You said it. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Embrace our story. My favorite podcast is The Moth, which is just real people telling stories in their real lives, right? Because it just is ripe with humanity, and it's like most beautiful and most heartbreaking expressions. And there's something about what you're doing here and how you're doing it that's about supporting people in embracing their humanity so that they are not bound by it. Right? Now, the other piece I get about you is that there is a part of you that says, why me?
You are so on target on both counts. Yes.
Right? And that's the question that has you stay in the back and forth, on and off again romance with this idea. Oh, it feels so true. Oh, yes, they must embrace their humanity. Oh, yes, that sounds so right. But why me? Right? And you just cut off from the life force. So rather than asking that question and going to your mind for the answer, because your mind will never come up with it. I actually don't think it's a bad question, but your mind is not the place to go for the answer. Right? Go to the life force for the answer. Right? I remember when I first realized that I was gay in this lifetime because all of my people needed to come out about this thing they're meant to do. And they're like, Jeffrey, you're gay in this lifetime because you needed a life PhD in coming out. Right? And then like, if I was a visible minority, if I had a learning disability or physical disability or had a different color skin, being gay isn't visible in that way. So for the rest of your life, you have to come out, right? Just a few years ago, I remember this. I went to this new dentist when I moved to LA, and this little dental hygienist lady, she's like, oh, you're very nice. Are you married? You should be married. You have kids. And I made a decision way early on, like I will always come out. And so I could have said, no, not married. But I didn't. I said, no, I'm not married, I'm gay, I'm single, and I don't have any kids. And she was like, oh. I have a cousin who's gay, and he's a very nice fellow. Right? Just because I was like, we need to put faces on this, right? So that was part of like, oh, why me? Oh, because you have a life PhD in coming out. Right? When it was like, when I realized I was good at language and helping people put language around what they do so they could market it and sell it, I was like, why am I good at that? I don't have a degree in English. And Spirit was like, Jeffrey, you've been in broadcasting your whole life. You worked in an NPR station broadcasting nationally. You taught choir and sang solos around the world, broadcasting messages. You were on the forefront of getting the web conferencing industry off the ground, broadcasting messages in real time. You've been a broadcaster your whole life. I was like, oh. Right? So why you? Because of all those things. I needed to be gay. I needed to have this weird broadcasting background. All the things that allow me to do this work, that's why you. But your wounds can't hear that. The part of you, there's something in this that feels, you're so lovely and soft in your presentation. And there's something authentic and beautiful about that. And there's some fire that I'm not seeing. And it's the fire that's calling you right now.
Whoa. Okay.
Do you feel that?
Yes, and it scares the hell out of me.
There you go.
Yeah.
That's the power shit.
Yeah. Yes, that is the power shift.
That's
You're
the fear of
right.
loss of control. That's
Yeah.
the trust.
Yeah.
That's the power shift.
Yeah.
So that's the place to look. Start by creating some conditions. You can look at some of the parts work stuff. This is precisely the course I'm building in a few weeks. So it's going to be like probably a 5-week journey or something to really look at what's the linchpin into the right? That's the piece to be in relationship with. Instead of shying away from it, to go, okay. And when you don't know how to be in relationship with it, ask for grace. Cool. Awesome.
Thank you.
Yes.
Right on target as always.
Oh, yes. So, we will wrap up here in just a few minutes. I want to just give a few reminders and then a sort of parting word. Reminders, number one, put in your calendar Called to Lead. That is November 16, 17, 18. It's in LA on the west side, Marina Del Rey. For those of you who are out of town, it's a 15-minute Uber ride or Lyft ride from LAX. So it's right near the airport. We're going to be ushering you into what your thought leadership in this world is really about. The goal of that event is to move you from service provider into thought leader, from practitioner into visionary CEO. And for most of the people in my tribe, you've been a practitioner for a while. You're not a newbie. You've been to all the how-to weekends, the 3-day, here's all the things you will learn. This is not that. This is really getting to the heart of what your work in this world is really meant to be about, and then moving into both embodiment and expression. Embodiment is becoming the living example of your brand's promise. And there is nothing more magnetic or appealing than that. And on the external expression side, we're going to be doing some very cool things around understanding your avatar, who your tribe really is, at a level and depth probably beyond you've ever had. We're going to be exploring storytelling and finding which stories to tell and why. We'll give a little precursor to that at next month's event. That's the topic next month. So that you will walk out feeling more... here's the words I'm hearing. More grace-filled and on purpose and connected to what your work in this world, so that you can walk out with that full expression online. In preparation for that, so that is Called to Lead, that's November 16, 17, 18. We'll let you all know about that very soon. Yes?
Thursday, Friday, Saturday?
It's a Thursday, Friday, Saturday. Yeah. I like it that way because then Sunday you can kind of like relax back into your world before Monday happens. Then coming up in about 3 weeks, we will be launching this program, which is called the Essential Shift. And it really is finding that essential linchpin that ushers you into the willingness to say yes. Because where a lot of my people are is they know they should say yes, they know what the yes is about, but they don't actually have the yes yet. And so that program is really designed to get you right up to that uncomfortable edge and then go, okay? So more about that coming out very soon. The third Thursday next month is September 21st. Look at that. So September 21st, put that in your calendar, 7 to 9, same place, same channel. And that one is going to be on storytelling. What I love about the storytelling stuff we're doing is a lot of us don't feel like we have stories or know which stories to tell. And I'm going to be teaching you, that's going to be a bit more of a teaching night than I think I normally do. but I'm going to be teaching you a way into finding a plethora of stories that all make sense for your audience. And there is one essential ingredient that once you see it, the stories will start popping. And you'll see stories you never thought were relevant to your tribe suddenly become essential ingredients. So we're going to dive into that September 21st, 7 to 9 p.m. Put that in your calendar. I think that's it in terms of announcement things, yeah? In terms of next steps tonight in the room, I love to get feedback. So we have some feedback forms we're going to hand out. If you can just share your experience tonight. On the back side, if you want to be in touch with us about the work I do in tribal marketing essentially, or if you want to be in touch about any of the other programs I mentioned, just fill out the back. Tribal marketing is the premier program I lead, which is a 3-month deep dive that has you get really connected to your tribe, understand why you're relevant to them, and then build a signature system to serve them. So you can really start to have a sense of consistent wealth doing the thing you're on earth to do. So if that's interesting to you, you can fill out the back and we'll be in touch with you about that. If you are online, you can go to tribalmarketing.biz/feedback for feedback. And gosh, there's another URL for the other one. tribalmarketing.biz/welcome. I think that's it. So tribalmarketing.biz/feedback and tribalmarketing.biz/welcome to do the same things I just mentioned online. Okay. So with that, I just wanted to leave you with this. If there's one thing I want you to remember from tonight, is that you cannot work hard enough to get into phase 3 partnership. There's no amount of work you can do to make that be true. The only thing in my experience that allows that to become a full-time experience is grace. Grace is a river that is always flowing. It's our job to drink from it. It's a river that is always flowing. It's our job to drink from it. So the next time you ask yourself a question that has you work harder, push yourself more, beat yourself up, trying to make your calling happen, instead, I want to invite you into this question. Am I willing to receive grace? And if the answer is yes, there's only 2 things to do. Invite it in and open up to receive it. Especially if you're up against some of those tough places we've been talking about tonight, where that life force is calling you into something that feels edgy and scary, and there's some parts of you that are like, and you don't know how to access or work with those parts, don't figure it out. Stop working so hard. Just go, oh, I don't even need to know how to work with that part of me. I can just say, all right, life force, I'm open to receive grace. Just pour some sugar on me, right? Just pour it in. Just pour that elixir in. Wherever it is, feel it in your body, just feel that sensation pouring in. This balm of love. And as you do, what you'll notice is an entirely new relationship of trust with something larger than yourself. And that new relationship of trust is what will usher you in to that next phase of partnership. Thank you all so much for saying yes and being on this journey. Thank you for being on this journey with me. It's so great to be in community with you. Have a great night, everybody.